Hello and welcome to Stationery Test Drive. This week we are looking at a school geometry box. I'm Vishal.
I'm Samir.
This is Minjal.
And before we get to this, why don't you tell us what you're up to, Samir?
I've been exploring some drawings and trying to figure out how I can get better at figure drawing specifically. So I've been trying to make a set of books that I can scribble in from reference and from figure drawing books, and that's basically what I've been exploring.
And you have an account of specifically for figure drawing on Instagram.
Yes, called Figure Hugger.
And we'll have links to that in the description. Let's before we go along, I'll also put up some pictures of the reference books you're using. Are you going to use the Loomis book, the legendary Loomis book?
Definitely the Loomis book.
Okay, so actually by the time this comes out, check out Samir and my channels. I might do a video on just us talking about the Loomis books and our progress on that. It'll be on my channel on YouTube and also linked in this video in the description. I've been working and continuing to work on a set of illustrations that I have done over the last couple of years, which is 120 original character designs for knights. And I'm continuing to color them. They do take a while, but they're also not really a big... I'm not in a big tearing hurry to finish them. So I'll show you what my progress is on screen right now. And Minjal?
Samir and I have been making games, for the Inky Memo website. They're going to be fun word games. Oh. So we're making graphics for the same.
And the games themselves will hopefully go viral and net you a low 7-figure sum from a certain publication at some point.
Yes, that's what we're all looking for.
Well, actually, we're looking to entertain our viewers and our readers and our gamers, just like we do on this show, which today we will hopefully do by showing you the school geometry instrument box. We have one here, and in some ways this one is the box. Samir, can you tell us why it's so iconic?
It's iconic because the Helix company, as it says here, and the Helix Oxford geometry box, which is what we have here.
It has a beautiful logo, which unfortunately does not really show up, but I'll take a close-up for camera. It's a man running with a sock, seemingly, on a stick, and it says... used all over the world. I mean, socks are pretty universal, I must say.
So, the Oxford set of mathematical instruments, complete and accurate. It has said this box has said this for, I think, about 100 years.
100 years?
Which is when the Helix company in the UK essentially invented this particular set of instruments. All of these instruments have existed for some of them thousands of years.
Let us show them. It comes with a nice timetable. My God, I haven't seen one of these for years, and with good reason. It's giving me bad PTSD of some kind. There's a set of useful symbol and units, and now let's talk about the actual instruments.
But yes, the Helix Oxford instrument box has always had a timetable. Has always had these basic instructions on how to do some constructions and some geometry. It has always had the two set squares, compass, a protractor, a ruler or a straight edge depending on where you are, a sharpener, an eraser, and also a little pencil. The divider is something that was added into the box only, I think, when it was introduced to the rest of the world. Strangely enough, I don't think the UK editions originally had this. But yes, the Helix company was started somewhere in the 1880s, I believe. And they started off manufacturing wooden rulers. And
so these, but in wood.
In wood.
In fact, I seem to remember that the early ones that I would have gotten
have a wood.
Yes, they had a blonde wood eraser.
I think ruler. We would have bought our first Oxford boxes somewhere in the 80s, I think, and those had a very thin wood ruler.
So the pencil goes into the compass like that. And to the point where, for me, I know this as a compass box. I don't really think of it as a geometry kit because I almost never ended up using anything besides the compass and the protractor.
And it's actually right to think of it as a compass box because after wooden rulers, the first thing that Helix actually invented was this compass.
Okay, this particular
model design of compass for drawing was patented by them somewhere in the 1890s. And in fact, if we can put close-ups of this.
We'll put in some macro shots.
But all of these have patent numbers actually embedded in the metal, which is quite unique and probably cost them a lot to do this, but because it's traditional, they continue to do it. The patent numbers for these are on the metal.
These are in the actual molds then.
Yeah.
So they're not just stickered on or screen printed on. It says a long patent number.
Yeah, and there's multiple patents. This is not the original design of the compass from 1890. This is several follow-up patents that have happened, and I'm guessing this design is somewhere from the 70s or 80s.
No, but also when we were growing up in India, Helix was never really available. So I think India, most of us used, the Camlin orange yellow tin box.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what all of us used in school. This, this really beautiful set was nowhere to be seen in India at all.
We grew up in the Middle East, and I guess because of the British influence there, we had access to some of this stuff. Both these and I think Chinese or Taiwanese at the time knockoffs of them. Similar packaging. You almost never read what brand it was from. You just saw this graphic or a graphic like this. It might have just been, downtown Beijing at the time, maybe. There's a lot of history here, but this particular picture is also historical. Is it?
Yes, this building is, I believe, the Balliol College, which is part of the Oxford University, and it's a 750-year-old building, and this has always been on the cover of these boxes.
It would be interesting for us to figure out, because this is a drawing of the Balliol College, probably done in pen and ink. And I'd love to, if anyone knows and can track down this particular drawing, maybe it's old, maybe it's new, we'd just like to know. Where does it come from? Because there's so much history in here. Minjal, are compasses just 100 years old? I think you've figured out that there's much more to them. They are ancient, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think compasses have been around for a very long time, purely because, people have been drawing circles for a very long time.
Right.
And they were not depending on putting pots upside down and drawing lines around them.
Well, so I've been reading a little about how Euclid was, the one who actually came up with all the practical geometry that we're
to the point where we just call it Euclidean geometry, right?
Correct. So were rudimentary versions of these instruments still around, or does anybody know if there were wooden compasses?
There must have been. I think there still are. In nautical terms, I've seen.
In fact, the thing that you need to realize is that this is a modern, new technology improvement on this.
Right.
Okay.
The divider, and this is called a divider, but it's essentially a caliper. An instrument of this sort has probably existed for many, many thousands of years. Because you cannot build anything, any of the large structures we have, stone structures, brick structures that have existed for thousands of years without using calipers to measure distances.
Let me see if I remember my basic construction. I think if you take anything and you put that there, then that first angle is a 60-degree angle. Then that second angle is a 120. You bisect the two there, and then take that, I'm just guessing here, and do that. Then that is how you construct a 90-degree angle. Hooray! And that's how you do it without a protractor, which probably came later and came to precision later.
Yeah, I didn't quite get what you were doing, but I think what you need to do is you kind of do that.
Yeah.
And then you do that.
Yeah, I think I messed it up.
Yeah,
somewhere.
I think it's about having the right distances, obviously, and then you join that up, and that's your 90 degree.
Okay, I think the way we learned it was by bisecting between 90 and 30.
Yeah, there are multiple ways of doing that.
So with just two equidistant, these are obviously engineered to have points and to be able to take a pencil. But I'm sure at some point it was just someone's hands, maybe.
No, I mean the addition of the pencil is probably fairly modern. As I said, what we used as a measuring device for thousands of years was just probably a metal version of this, or before that a wooden version of this, where you just measured distances. So you would essentially, let's say, measure the distance between these 2 points, and then you would measure that against something like a ruler.
Okay.
And that's how it would work. The idea of attaching a drawing or a writing implement to it and then drawing circles is probably much more recent than we think it is. It's an addition that happened later. In the good old days, when you were working on things that were not the size of a paper but architecture, you would have just used string as your compass, so to speak. You would just put
nail it into the ground.
You nail the string into one end of the ground. Here, this would be your string, and you would attach a chalk or whatever to the other end, and you would draw a circle.
Okay, and I think people still do that. I've seen people use strings on construction sites quite often.
Yeah, like plumb lines, and those are still used a lot. Strings as a measuring device.
So this set would essentially be something that kids in school use, right? This is not like a technical. No. Geometry.
And in fact, Helix invented this very much for an educational reason. It's not that they expected. I mean, obviously, this box was invented somewhere in, I think, 1921 or so. And when they did that, there wouldn't have been a box like this available even for technical people. So in some ways, maybe there were plenty of technical people who used this as kind of an inexpensive version of it.
Speaking of non-technical people, we are somewhere in between technical and non-technical. And what we do on the show every week, if you are not a regular viewer, is that we look at these kinds of tools, but we also do our own artwork or bring our own skills. We're artists, we're calligraphers, we're designers, and we come up with pieces highlighting and using these sorts of instruments. We've each done one. Minjal, why don't you show us yours?
And the idea behind what we do here is that we don't plan on what we are going to use them for. We each come up with our own idea,
our own interpretation,
independent from each other, so that we can see what we all come up with.
Yeah, and most of the time we've not even shown each other these before they're on camera. So I'm seeing this for the first time. Very good use of the...
the only instrument that I really can use in the geometry box.
I think both you and I ended up using just the compass. I did it for a more illustrated effect. You have done a wonderful yin-yang symbol, perfectly constructed, I must say. And Samir,
I also chose to do a face.
This, I believe.
So we'll keep it here, and I'm sure people can see all of it in the inserts that we're putting in. So we've each approached this from a different perspective. Samir, yours is sort of the most geometric and portrait. Minjal's yours is the most geometric, and mine is the most that really you wouldn't be able to tell was made with a compass in some ways. And I should explain that I used a compass as guidelines. I put down with a pencil several concentric circles and then went over it with a fine liner. So it's not a perfect geometric use, but I would not have been able to do this without a compass.
But that is actually a very unique use of the geometry box.
I think in fact, these three are a good range of what you can do with a geometry box. You can either make something that is completely geometrical, and that's the most traditional and the most valid way of using the original set of instruments. Then you can take it a little away from pure geometry, and then you kind of try to make things out of those geometrical shapes. And then you have used it to make a very illustrative thing, but using the geometry only as like the starting,
the veneer
scaffold of it.
Which is actually the opposite of how you would use geometrical shapes in constructing drawings. Usually you would use it to create, as you did, the structure of the face, whereas I drew the face in my freehand way, and then created the textural guidelines using the compass. In fact, I didn't use a one of these. I'm sorry, I've cheated. But then we were going for the general rather than the specific. I used this more modern, and you can see if you want to see the evolution of a compass. There you go. This one is the old Helix. This one is by a company called Maped. I think that we're saying that right. They're an acronym, aren't they?
Yeah, it's a French company, and in fact, Maped now owns Helix.
Okay, so these are cousins of a sort. The good thing about the Maped, other than it looking fantastic, is that it's very well constructed from aluminium, and unlike this one where you can barely get this pencil in, and it's a very small, very tiny, very specialized pencil. In fact, I remember that in school, if you lost this pencil, you pretty much couldn't use this anymore because you couldn't buy pencils of that size.
Some of the thicker gauge pencils wouldn't go.
Even a regular Staedtler or an Apsara or what we have Natraj now. Whereas this one, I can use my trusty Pentel Graph, which you will see in an upcoming episode. And yeah, there you go. Match made in heaven.
Perfect.
Samir, did you end up using all the instruments in the box? Because it looks like you have more than Vishal and I do.
Yeah, because I still don't know how to use set squares. I will say that.
I attempted to use all of them. I think I could have easily done without using the protractor in this particular case. Okay. Although a protractor is obviously a very useful instrument. Mm-hmm. But I generally stuck to kind of 90-degree and 45-degree kind of angles here. So
constructed angles rather than...
So I ended up using these to construct the angles.
Okay.
Because you have 45 degrees, 90 degrees...
right. And in parallel. The thing that was always told
to me...
This
is 30, this is 60.
Right.
So the interesting thing about these things is that they're probably the two things in a geometry box which even most students do not end up using.
Yeah.
Not their fault, because mostly we are just never taught or told what they're for.
I was never really taught how to use them. I was told that, you can use them to make parallel lines, but don't worry about it. That's only if you get into engineering.
Yeah, so let's demonstrate some of what this can be used for.
Honestly, as a person who draws now and is not an engineer, I would still like to know how to construct parallel lines.
Now, the problem with most modern sets of set squares is that if you can see these closely, they have kind of a bevel at the edge. Now, as time has gone by, these have become purely aesthetic and they have been made smooth, whereas originally, I remember I had a set when I was growing up where the bevel was literally like a step.
Okay.
So that these two would fit into each
other. They would
lock
together. Okay.
Whereas these don't really lock together, but if you're very careful, you can manage.
Okay.
So the parallel line thing, that's fairly simple. Let's say we want to make a line that's parallel to this.
So these are now maths classes with Samir?
Something like that.
These are art classes.
So you lock these two together. So you turn one around and you lock it into the bevel so that it slides. And get this to follow the line. And then you just slide it along. And that's a parallel line.
Huh.
And then you slide it along, and that's a parallel line.
And that is where that bevel should actually be.
These are all parallel lines.
Yeah.
So that's one use of a set square. There are other uses. Of course, the main use that you can put it to is the fact that you have all the standard angles. So you have a 90-degree, which you can just draw, by doing that.
Right.
You have
That's a 45, I think.
This is a 60.
Oh, that's a 60, yes.
And you have a 30.
The 45 is on the other
And you have the 45s, two of them here.
Yeah.
Now, that's again where you can put them together. If you put them together this way, you have
45 and 30.
A 30 and a 45s. Therefore, that is a 75. So now you made a 75-degree angle, this one. You also can use it in a slightly more complicated way, which is you put them together like this. This one's a little tricky. So let's say this is the line that you want to draw off and you want to make an angle here. You put these together here.
Okay.
And draw this line. Draw this little bit here. That's what the holes are for.
Okay.
And when you join this up, that is a 15-degree angle.
Huh.
So yeah, these two things can be quite useful if you know how to use them, but no one ever taught us.
Yes,
No
I was
one
just coming to this. We were just not taught all this in school at all.
Stationary test drive, making you learn things whether you liked it or not.
No, see now, the other thing I want to point out is y'all used the Helix,
Right.
which obviously from what y'all have discussed so far seems like a really good
And the
brand,
Maped.
and the Maped. Now, what I had with me was this Classmate and Dome's brand.
These are both brands in India. I'm sure
These
you'll
are-
find similar price pointed things.
Yes, these are very popular with school children, school stationery.
Yeah, and much
No.
more colorful than the classic
Yeah,
one.
these are,
Yes.
the cool. These are the things that the cool kids used to bring into school or something like it.
See, as far as coolness is concerned, yes, maybe
They're more.
they're good looking boxes.
But again, this is exactly what I was talking about. The
bevel on the
Oxford ones
Oxford.
still have a little bit of a bevel. These have none, so you
You
couldn't
actually use them for
can't
their
actually
intended purpose.
use them as well to make a parallel line.
No,
for
also
example.
the point I want to make is now this compass actually it has a blunt edge.
Okay.
Now, if you're trying to do any kind of geometry with a compass that has
Yeah,
a
it is.
blunt edge,
It comes out of the box blunted. It's not really.
so
And we are using it on a nice sheet of on a desk pad, so that it actually has something to purchase onto. On a harder surface, it kind of skitters around.
yeah. So I had a lot of problems with this. So if this is what school children are using, I mean, I think they're going to end up hating math just like I do, because really no angles, no constructions are going to make sense.
I mean, it's very pretty and it's nicely machined and all that, but the fact is that the actual usable point.
But the thing we're not we're probably not considering is it like, are they making this as a feature? Like, is it supposed to be safer?
Is it supposed to be this way?
So kids are going to be safe, but none of them are really entering the IITs in India. Is that what we're talking about?
Now the classmate seems to be on a different level entirely.
We're getting into parenting issues here, but I think the term, what's that thing called? Helicopter
Parenting.
Well,
No,
points that aren't pointy.
now Classmate, I'll tell you, Classmate, the tip is sharp,
Okay.
but if you look at this,
That's terrible.
that is terrible. This mechanism is terrible.
Having a screw choke like that is much better than having a threaded thing which barely has any thing to work
Yeah,
against.
I'll talk about this particular thing because I've had this kind of choke, and then I've also used this kind of choke when I was growing up. And when growing up, I preferred this kind to this because this one just depends on a single locking thing, and it kind of comes loose often enough. But the problem with this is that it's really, I'm guessing, cheap plastic.
No, this is very flimsy because it's also actually managed to gouge and make marks on all my pencils because
It needs to in order to get any kind of grip on it.
Yeah, because I remember that when I was a kid and we had this kind of choke for these, either you had the body be metal and this be plastic, or you had both of them be metal and that works better. But I think
yes.
both of them being plastic is just
No, you need to have some kind of good materials. These also seem to have a pen holder.
That is the divider. That is the attachment for the divider.
Oh, okay. So you convert
Yeah.
Okay, so the problem is that this thing is too fancy.
Yeah, like what is this?
How
thing?
do you get
How
this
is
thing
this?
out?
No, you need to.
No. How do you get this out?
No, you just put it in there, and then you play.
This fits into the same.
Oh, which kid is going to do that when they're in class? Yeah, you have to really, and then you'll gouge your eye out by the time. Yeah.
I mean,
there is such a thing as too much engineering and being too clever. I think this
is a little too clever. That's the problem.
Like in this case, look, in some ways you'd say this is worse because the grip is, weird compared to a nice point like this. But I've never had any problem with this grip. For me, this is the best compass I've ever used. It's simple. It works. It works with pens. It works with pencils. Most pens. You can't use very thick pens on it. But, I think that, look at that. What is that? I know that there are more precise instruments that have a crossbar in between where you don't actually move these manually. You just twist the crossbar.
And those
are actually very good.
Those are sort of proper instrument boxes that are meant for artists and designers, which we will probably cover at some point, because they are quite different. I mean, they have all the same instruments as these, but they're on a different level of precision.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm going to tell mothers, if the Camlin box is still available, geometry box, orange, yellow Camlin geometry box in India, please buy that. Do not buy Domes or Classmate geometry boxes. Yeah. They're great brands. They make great stationery products. Maybe geometry boxes, not their forte.
I mean, I think the problem here is that they've done too much for them. This still works. I know that it doesn't look as cool.
It's a design that's probably 50 years old at least.
The design itself might be hundreds of years old.
No, I mean this particular one.
Mold, yes.
But yeah, it just works.
Yeah, and you can't beat what works. And yes, we've never tried this eraser because I can pretty much guarantee you it's not really good. Speaking of erasers, look forward to us talking about erasers in the next episode. I think we've generally ranted and raved about geometry and compass boxes in school and good tools and what you can do with them for quite a good while. I think that's it. Is there anything to add?
No, I think geometry boxes are one of those things that we all take for granted, and every kid has one. And as we are learning with some of the things I showed you, there's a lot more to them than meets the eye.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that we aren't taught these things in the school that forces you to buy these boxes.
Yeah, because, I remember being with kids, including myself, being put out of class because we didn't have our geometry box, and having to stand out there for
a box in which you don't use six things out of the 7 things that are in it.
Which they didn't teach us to do.
So is that to do with CBSE schools or just schools in general?
That's just schools in general, I think. They do ridiculous things. Let's not beat around the bush there.
We survived school. We did not thrive in it. Certain other people who shall not be named who are on this show, maybe they did. But what we're trying to say, I guess, in summation is that at least get a good compass. Like a good map-out compass, you can just buy it separately. It fits pencils, pens. It's really nice. And you don't need to do very geometric things in it, although this is great. And I would suggest that everyone looks up pattern making.
Yeah, I think if you want to really learn how to use a geometry box, you need to learn it with things like this, because these are the basics on which you build more creative, looser things.
Yeah. And so we have shown you a whole range of everything. You don't need to, after a while, I'm telling you, I used the compass to create all the basic lines. I went in with a pass, and then I went in with just freehand, using the guidelines to give it more organic life. So you can make organic looking things with mechanical basis. That is the basis of most drawings and most good drawings in the world that you think of as lively and beautiful, whether they're the Renaissance paintings of
they all started with guidelines that are kind of similar to this.
Look up any construction drawings from your favorite old master. You will find them that they have used circles and squares and things like this. So learn about compass boxes. I've learned how to use a set square in this very episode, so I will try to incorporate that into my work, especially for things like making comics and things like that.
But Samir, maybe you should do a tutorial for how to make a drawing like this, because this is really interesting.
We can do that.
We'll have that either on our own channel. Samir has a channel on YouTube, and so do I. Or we can have it here on Enki Memo. Let us know in the comments what you would actually like us to
do with the geometry box.
Would you like to see more? Would you like to see constructed stuff of this kind, of even just this? I'm sure there's like a nice calligraphic grid or a pattern making grid that can be made. Arabesque grids are probably where geometry and where we get the term geometry in some ways. I'm sure all those great Arab architects and Arab scientists and scholars used instruments like these to create all those wonderful buildings and all. And the parakeets have come home to nest. Yes, I'm not exaggerating. They're nesting outside.
They are nesting outside our windows. So I think that's our cue to
sign out.
Yeah, you can find all of us online. We at the social media links that we're showing you, as well as our own websites. You can sign up to the Inky Memo newsletter at inkymemo.com, where we talk about things like this very often. And stay tuned to more episodes of Stationery Test Drive, where, like I teased, we will be looking at an eraser very soon. And then, again, like a compass box, you don't think of it as an artistic tool, but we will be putting it to that use. So, see you next time. Thank you for joining us. I'm Vishal.
I'm Samir.
I'm Minjal.
And until next time, divide and conquer.